Hi there, Christine Glover here with another installment of How Opposites Attract, plotting the turning points of the romance novel, in particular the emotional turning points. We discussed that in the first part of the series, and you can go and watch that first if you haven't seen it already. That is in the description below. The link is there. The link for the beat sheet will also be in the description below, so you can go back even further if you need to refresh yourself. I based this workshop loosely on the 6-part story structure by Michael Haig, as presented by him. So I will also drop a link to his Story Mastery website, and you can take a look at more of his information there as well. So last week we discussed how to start the novels, how to start the emotional turning points of the novel. This week we're going to go into, going to kind of recap what we discussed last week with some examples, and then we're going to go into the midpoint of the romance novel and go a little bit deeper there. So bear with me. I'm going to use a book that I wrote several years ago and published myself. I'm very proud of this book. It's had several covers, but the newest one is this one, which my fabulous daughter created for me. She's a wonderful graphic designer. So the TYCOON'S Red Hot Marriage Merger is what I'm going to use for the examples. I use the paperback because it's easier to find the pages that way than to try to figure out what percentage marks are in the Kindle reader thing. I don't even understand how that works. I prefer looking at page numbers. So I went ahead and I marked that. I was a little bit more prepared this time. Last time I was a little bit COVID-y brain, as I'm sure some of you can relate to. So we're going to dig right in pretty much immediately, first by going over some of the emotional turning points and refreshing our memory with that. So bear with me because I will be looking down somewhat. There's a lot of material to cover and a lot of really good information here, and I don't want to miss anything. If you have any questions, just pop me an email. I'll put that in the description below as well. You can always get a copy of the cheat sheet that I made to describe the emotional turning points. If you email me, I'd be happy to send you a copy. I have no problem sharing my information with you. Caveats again, that I use him and her. Those are the pronouns that I use, but you can substitute any pronouns you like. You can make them shapeshifters, you can make them vampires, it can be sweet, it can be sexy, it can be hot, it can be light, it can be comedy, but basically I'm doing him, her, and that's how I'm rolling, because that's what I write. So anyway, so the first week that we discussed the hook, okay? The hook is the setup and the situation, the inciting incident, a little bit of the slice of life. So what happens then is you basically put the two lovebirds together and you give them a reason to go forward in this journey toward finding a true happily ever after. But the reason isn't always a good one in the beginning. So we use, in romance novels, we use popular tropes like marriage of convenience, secret baby, opposites attract, forced proximity, bodyguard stories, protector, savior, billionaire stories, you name it. They run the whole gamut. So marriage of convenience, fake fiance is a pretty popular trope, and it was back when I wrote this book and published it in 2015. Anyway, so I'm going to show you how the first meeting goes between Cassandra and her love interest, why do I forget his name? Between Cassandra and Marco Delgado. This is the initial hook, and it's setting up the, basically it's setting up the little bit of the slice of life, letting you go into the opportunity moment, okay? So in the very beginning, this is a marriage of convenience revenge story, and Marco Delgado is after Cassandra Nelson's shipbuilding company. So when they first hook up together, he remembers her as an awkward teen. She's trying to save her family's business from being ruined by this man who's seeking vengeance on them when she feels personally responsible for what happened to her brother that day ever so many years ago, and also to him all those years ago. So they have a connection already, and now she's going to him and she's going to make him an offer he can't refuse. Here's the end of the scene. It's literally the 4th page. So we haven't waited that long to get to the first 10% hooky kind of part where we throw them together. Taking over Nelson Industries won't change what happened 4 years ago, nor will it give you the key to the regatta world. She pushed back from the desk, which is why you have to listen to me. The insistent throb of Latin-inspired dance music pulsing outside his office joined the thundering tempo clanging in his ears. The memory of the days following his father's death flashed. A brutal reminder of the bitterness consuming his soul even now. Despite all he had gained and amassed In the years since that tragic day, he had failed to lose the stigma of being Ramon Delgado's bastard son, a favorite trope of mine. A son who'd been left with nothing but a permanently damaged regatta racing catamaran, a small trust fund, and a shattered reputation. Before him stood a representative of the very world that had ostracized him, expecting him to back down. "What can you offer me that will ensure my re-entry, Cassandra?" She looked down her perfectly straight nose and said, "Legitimacy." So that's the initial hook. So she's giving him a plan. She's setting up what she thinks is going to be a fake fiancé, fake relationship. But the plot thickens. As we move into opportunity, she realizes that he wants even more from her, okay? So in this moment, he makes her curious. He awakens her. Her hormones are alive in the opportunity moment, and she's really curious about this man. He's interested in her, and she's never really felt this before. She comes to him and proposes a temporary situation. But he has another plan in mind. An intense sizzling sensation traveled into her skin and zoomed through her body. A resounding chorus of hormones, very female and very jubilant, rushed into all her erogenous zones. The nightclub's pulsating energy outside the office faded away. Cassandra turned, mesmerized, and lost the energy blazing within her, to face him. "What else can I offer you?" she asked. "I have my name, nothing more." At least nothing that she wanted to yield as part of this unholy alliance. His mouth lifted at one corner, giving him a devilish look. "You have something I want very much." Her legs trembled. Anxiety joined her body's hallelujah chorus while his emerald eyes held her gaze. "What are you talking about?" she asked after a moment's hesitation. "To start with, I'd like to take you out on the dance floor to see if you're capable of real passion," he said. "If I marry you, I expect more than a sexless arrangement." Crap and double cramp. This was not going the way she had intended. "What do you mean?" "I expect a lifelong commitment. All of it. Including having you in my bed, Cassandra." The air snapped between them. Air whooshed through her ears, making her lightheaded. Shock and disbelief pumped through her veins. In all her midnight calculations and planning for this proposal, she'd never considered the possibility of Marco wanting to stay married, let alone have sex. She twisted her purse strap. "You can't want me that way. No one had before. Why would this spectacular specimen of a man be any different?" "You'd be surprised about what I want," he said, closing the distance between them. His breath whispered across her skin. Goosebumps prickled along her nape and down her arms. She clutched her bag to her chest, afraid and yet strangely tantalized by his seductive tone. "But a lifetime? Why throw that chance away for someone you don't love?" she asked. "A temporary marriage is the best option." "Love is overrated. If we marry, I won't let you back out. Otherwise, I'll be a pariah again." He drew his finger down her neck, all the way down her arm, and curled it around her bag straps. "Are you willing to trade your future, your entire life, to save your family's company?" His brief touch turned all her muscles into jelly. A trembling sensation skittered along her spine and warred with her mind's outrage. "I want what's best for my family." She'd probably fail his test, the dance, and that would be the end of her insane idea, but she had no other choice. "But I don't know how to dance." Or how to have sex, but she kept that little tidbit to herself. He loosened his hold on her purse, lifted it from her shaking hands, and placed it on the desk. "With me, you'll learn," he said. Marco's a very confident man, but he's got a lot of baggage, okay? He's a bastard son. He's a true orphan in every sense of the word. His mother died when he was a kid of an aneurysm. His father really didn't want to spend any time with him because he was just a mistake that shouldn't have happened. He didn't really have a home. He's an orphan emotionally, but she is too, because she's the oddball in her family. She's the geek. She's the mathematician. She's, the one protecting her brother who died in a terrible boating accident 4 years ago. And she is also an orphan because she can't relate to her parents. She's left outside of the loop, even though she's inside the loop because of their money and their fame and the fact that they're the big Nelson Industries shipping company. So they're both orphans. So as we move into this, she does agree. I'm not going to leave you any surprises here, but if you want to buy the book with its new cover, if you've never to see how I've worked it all out, that would be great. I mean, I'm not pushing it, but it's a fun story. It's one of my favorites. Okay, so now we're moving into what's called the first turning point. which is, look at all these papers. Hello, I got so much information here. I need a desk or something in front of me, but I haven't gotten that worked out yet. So now we are on turning point number 1, the change of plans at the 25% mark. This is where the flaws, the character's flaws are set. Like they each have their own flaws. Like my men tend to be men who have the flaw of believing they are not worthy of love. My women are usually low self-esteem based on their history, their background. They can hide it by being spunky and feisty and all of that, but they typically have a low self-esteem. They're not super, they think they're strong, but they're not really emotionally strong. So their flaws are set. So she's feeling very like, I'm not worthy of you, and he is feeling very not worthy of her. So those are the flaws that are set. But at the same time, they're drawn to each other, as we know, because they're physically attracted to each other, and they're starting to develop some little emotions. Now, for him, it's a challenge, and he wants to get her to that next point, to where he can be with her and not have to like totally give over his heart, because he's afraid to give over his heart. He's afraid to love because he's been burned by it. He's been burned his whole life by it. So he's got a lot of baggage, and particularly Marco's case, he definitely does. So in the first section, in turning point 1, she's seen more of a wanderer, and she's retreating away from him, trying to protect herself, trying to protect herself from his advances. He is pursuing, he's advancing, he's going after her. He wants her in a right way, but he's willing to wait. A lot of times at the first turning point, there's a kiss. It can be more than a kiss, it can be less than a kiss, but something happens that brings these two to realize something different is happening between us, and it's more than just an arranged marriage anymore. It's more than just the situation that brought us together. We are now I'm starting to feel things. So a lot of times what happens in the first turning point, this is where they start to fall in love. Okay, they're starting to get close. They have a physical slip, a kiss, a touch, something more. And their emotional guards are a little bit down. If there's say a kiss, oftentimes her body awakens. That's how I look at it. Like she's like coming alive, and she kind of is like, oh no, I don't want it to be, because I feel like it's my traitor. I don't want to act on this. And she might yield to a kiss or a moment with this man or not, but she's definitely wanting him. And just to be clear here, consent is important. So I try to weave that in, but she's curious and she wants to do something. So she's her guard is coming down. If she kisses him, if she goes to that point, if she has that little physical slip with him, she suddenly becomes alive. Her body awakens. She's like, oh my gosh, this is like amazing. And she sees something in him that makes her want to get to know him even more. She can't deny herself and the deep visceral need burning inside her, so she caves to his physical advance, but in the process she becomes emotionally vulnerable. He's like magic. He's a drug. He's intoxicating. But she's no pushover, and she refuses to lose or yield at first. Still, she tries desperately to retreat from his advance. Now he, on the other hand, his emotions start to awaken, and that's scary stuff for this guy. He believes he's in charge physically, and his emotions are guarded behind his aloof, world-weary mask. But even though he's in charge, she still challenges him emotionally and stands her ground. In order to regain control of the situation and protect himself, he warns her that this can't be anything more than sex, a casual fling, temporary thing, like there will be no love between them. We're going to be together physically and have a marriage on paper, but that's it. They will not ever fall in love, basically. They're guarding their hearts. When the heroine yields to him or makes the move with him, gives over herself to him with a full wanting to do it, he becomes emotionally unguarded because he wants her. He wants to brand her as his, and he doesn't want to let her go. And he's had a taste of her, and he's seeing something more. Once he gets her out of his system, though, he thinks they'll be able to move on, emotionally in this case, and he'll keep his emotional distance. But he's going to start feeling possessive. He's going to start wanting to be with her more. And after he has this moment with her, as he leads up towards getting closer, he then becomes emotionally vulnerable. This is clearly seen in An Officer and a Gentleman. When they have their big moment at the midpoint of the movie, the character that Richard Gere plays reveals that his mother committed suicide. It's a pivotal point. It's huge. So later on, when the black moment happens, it's a mirror of what happened after he exposed himself. So they're starting to let their guards down after they have this little bit of a kiss. In the Tycoon's Red Hot Marriage Merger, there's a change of plans at the 25% mark. And in this case, she is confused because he hasn't done anything with her yet and they're married. She expected something to happen already and he's still kind of taking his time with her. So here we go. We're heading into the 25% mark, which is about page 32, 33. In my book, that's about 150 pages, so that is literally about the quarter mark, roughly. Until you walked into my nightclub and surprised me with your interesting proposal, I hadn't completely formulated a plan to regain full entry into your regatta society. Marco turned Cassandra in his arms, then removed her glasses. You're my wife, so you'll never disappoint me. After all, she'd given him the key to unlock her world's bolted doors. Herself. He'd brand her, and the entire regatta racing world would know whom she belonged to when they returned to Florida. She hissed in a breath, and her cheeks flamed with a hot color. Marco, he brushed his lips across her temples and kissed the delicate shell of her ear. Our wedding was fast, but I'm slowing down the honeymoon, Marco whispered. I want you to want to be with me, not feel forced into having sex. Good job, Marco! Though he had no intention of losing his heart, he wanted Cassandra to enjoy being with him because there was something about her that made him feel like she deserved a warm, compassionate lover. She tilted her head back, exposing the creamy column of her neck. But I thought, Marco inhaled her scent, a light floral mix of tuberose and honeysuckle, sweet and pure. Don't think, just be, he said, framing her with his body and indulged in tasting the tender pulse point in her delicate collarbone. She mewed and lust slammed into his groin. Hold back, stand down, caution! His mind roared with the heat stirring through his blood. You're making it difficult to stop, he warned, ending his delicious decadent tastes of her skin. I don't want to stop, I want to get it over with. Having sex should be fun, not a chore, Marco said, stepping away from her and feigning nonchalance in an attempt to control his arousal. I see, she said, but we're not talking about making love. We're discussing having sex, and I'm more than ready. You're an inexperienced virgin, and our agreement has been very sudden. If you're not comfortable, it will be a chore for the rest of our lives. He's thinking with his head there. I don't want that kind of marriage. She tapped her foot. This is about making sure I'm able to adequately satisfy your needs, because I know you don't actually care about my feelings. His chest tightened. Good God, why was she making this so difficult? He'd practiced restraint and she'd acted like he'd committed a cardinal sin. We made a deal, but I'm not a monster, he said. I care about how you feel when I'm sleeping with you. Just because the marriage is a professional arrangement doesn't mean we shouldn't enjoy a lifetime of hot, sexy nights. So things are really moving along now and they're getting closer and closer and closer. And I love how they get to this point where they finally do have their all in, their midpoint, and that's where we're leading to next. So as we move forward in the story, you get to the middle of the story, and that's where the big, we're all in like the Lord of the Rings, it's like we're all gonna go on this adventure together and save the world and all of the elves and everything, blah, blah, blah. So they're all in, they're gonna be all in. At this point, for the heroine, she is alive and transformed after sex, empowered, emotional warrior. She's advancing. Her body is her ally. For him, it's a false victory. He's weaker emotionally because he's been with her. He feels like he's losing control. He can't get enough of her. He's wanting to retreat. She won't let him. She's chipping away at his guarded heart now, and he is kind of starting to let her in, okay? So she is awakened emotionally and physically. She feels alive. She feels something more in his passionate possession when he becomes emotionally unguarded afterward, when he shares something about himself. Fun fact, men tend to be more emotionally vulnerable after the act of sex. I don't know, women tend to be more vulnerable before the act of sex. So she becomes braver emotionally because now she thinks she might be able to have it all after all. And she starts pushing for more. She regains physical control and he can't resist her. She's braver because he's awakened her. He gives her so much. She has the strength to let go of her past, the courage to move forward to her future, the key to unlock his heart. Though he doesn't know he gave her the key, she'll remind him later because he showed her that she was worthy. He loved her, even though he wouldn't admit it. So to himself or to her, he showed her what the path to happiness was. in those moments. And that was that they could be together forever with a real relationship, two partners loving and growing old together. And that's what they both want, really. They just don't 100% know it yet. So now we're heading into the midpoint. For me, in this case, it's explosive, sexy times. I won't go into all of the details. Her heart no longer had a way to fight the emotions Marco had unlocked. And her body no longer had a way to fight the maelstrom of sensations building on a wave upon wave of intensity. Finally, Cassandra reached the apex of reason in her. Censored, whipped through her, starlight bursting behind her eyes until she flew over the edge and into the abyss of the unknown. And the ocean heard her cry, scream Marco's name, while she clung to the one lifeline that remained, Marco. Only he had the power to set her free, and only he had the strength to bring her back to himself. Afterwards, he shares with her something important. So again, I'm not going to go into all the details. I don't want to get graphic. It's a YouTube video, but you get the gist. So they're definitely on the road to having a real relationship. But now that they've gone all in, the real world's going to start pressing in. And I talked a little bit about that in my beat sheet workshop. So you're going to want to take a look at that workshop and listen to it as well and see if that might not jog some things for you. The bottom line is we're now all in, and this is when the flaws are going to get tested. There's going to be usually about 3 emotional hits until we get to that point where they break up, and that's something that I'm going to discuss in the next video. I hope you like this video. I hope I didn't wander around too much. There's a lot of information. I mean, she actually initiated this little excitement in her life, which was great, but it was after he really wooed her. And I think that was beautiful. That was during the whole going up to the midpoint. That's called the fun and games. That's where they go on dates. That's where they're going on their little honeymoon on his nice boat, and they're having nice swimming little sessions together and suntan lotiony things, and that's wonderful, right? Like that's just building to this moment. So they're slowly growing to trust and respect each other so that they can get to that moment. Now they've had that moment. They're gonna come down off of that, and all of a sudden problems are gonna start hitting. And that's when things get really scary for this couple, because we don't know how are they gonna react when their flaws are truly tested. Especially how is Marco going to react? How is the hero going to react? His arc is bigger. His growth arc is bigger. He has to react a certain way to a secret that will be exposed at the big gala, and I will share that with you later in the next video in part 3 of the emotional turning points. I hope you liked the video. If you have any questions, drop me a line. If you have any suggestions, please do. I need a desk, apparently. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. Always looking for them. Would love to get some more subscribers. If you're interested in learning more about craft, or you have any ideas of things that you'd like for me to talk to you about, that would be great. I've also got other authors lined up. I've got someone coming in a couple of weeks that's going to discuss world building, and that's a lot of fun too. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you when we do part 3. Bye, and happy writing.